In the dead of night, a 200-foot vessel violently ground to a halt on a jagged rocky reef. On the morning of October 28, 1981, a local fisherman spotted the stranded vessel. He immediately recognized the red hammer and sickle flag flying from its tower. This map shows the depth of the violation. The submarine was positioned nearly 10 miles inside the Gåsefjärden military zone, a restricted area deep within Swedish sovereign territory. The Soviet captain blamed a simple navigational error, but locals on the islands reported hearing heavy diesel engines roaring throughout the entire night as the crew desperately tried to tear the submarine off the rocks. Elite Swedish troops quickly mobilized, taking up heavily armed defensive positions on the jagged islands surrounding the trapped crew. This bizarre grounding forced a publicly neutral nation to choose between its pacifist image and a direct military confrontation with a global superpower. This map shows the post-World War II ideological divide didn't stop at the shoreline. The Soviet Union extended that boundary straight across the Baltic Sea, unilaterally pushing its maritime borders outward to claim a 12 nautical mile buffer zone, shrinking international waters. The airspace and shipping lanes of the region became claustrophobic, driven by the constant threat of blockades and military standoffs. That tension frequently turned violent. In the summer of 1952, Soviet MiGs shot down a Swedish military DC-3 over the Baltic. Days later, they shot down the Catalina rescue plane sent to look for the survivors. The Soviets were aggressive because they knew exactly what the Swedes were doing. While maintaining a strictly neutral public image, Sweden was secretly collaborating with NATO, acting as the West's primary signal intelligence gatherer in the north. The Baltic was a highly volatile intelligence goldmine. For the governments bordering it, neutrality was a diplomatic fiction. This diagram shows the cross-section of the Baltic seafloor. The jagged floor and shallow depths cause sonar waves to bounce and scatter, making it difficult to detect a hidden submarine. This environment created a relentless cat-and-mouse game. Close-quarters intelligence operations were happening constantly, both in the air and under the water. To counter Soviet incursions, Sweden engineered the Näcken-class submarines, vessels built with teardrop holes designed specifically to maneuver through these tricky shallow waters. Their core advantage was an air-independent propulsion system. By using a closed-cycle Stirling engine that didn't require outside air to burn fuel, these submarines could remain completely submerged and undetectable for up to 14 days, which brings us back to the grounding in 1981. With the Soviet sub trapped in the archipelago, Swedish Prime Minister Thorbjörn Fälldin stepped before the press to deliver a massive escalation. Swedish scientists had secretly taken radiation measurements outside the stranded hull. The readings confirmed the U-137 was carrying live nuclear weapons. Moscow responded by massing a heavily armed naval armada right at the edge of the Swedish territorial border, preparing to force their way in and extract their submarine. The Swedish military braced for a full-scale amphibious assault. A local navigation error had pushed the Cold War to the brink of active conflict. Sweden held its ground. The government demanded that Moscow cover the salvage costs, issue a formal apology, and submit the Soviet captain to a humiliating military interrogation. Realizing that an armed rescue mission inside Swedish territory would trigger a massive international crisis, the Soviet leadership finally backed down. 10 days after running aground, the U-137 was pulled off the rocks and escorted back to international waters by a Swedish naval convoy. Today, you can see the hardware from this shadow war preserved at the Karlskrona Naval Museum, where one of the original Swedish Näcken-class submarines is on permanent display. By 1981, Swedish neutrality was no longer a matter of passive avoidance. It had become a high-stakes balancing act of advanced engineering, covert intelligence, and the sheer grit required to stare down a nuclear giant.